I see you now, Alina. Too clearly. The words hung in the air of the glass-walled office, spoken by a man who once commanded billion-dollar boardrooms, but now sat across from the woman he'd dismissed as forgettable. Rowan Leclerc's voice carried something foreign, humility. His eyes, which had once skipped over her like she was office furniture, now held her gaze with an intensity that made her chest tighten. This is the story of Alina Hart, a woman who spent years being invisible in plain sight. While her boss built a tech empire worth billions, she worked 18-hour days in his shadow, booking his flights to Dubai while missing her own mother's doctor appointments. She knew every detail of his business, better than he did, yet he barely knew her last name. Alina was the kind of person who arrived first and left last, who remembered everyone's coffee orders and never forgot a deadline. She was brilliant, strategic, and completely overlooked. For 3 years she poured her life into making Rowan Leclerc look like a genius while her own dreams collected dust in a drawer. The tech world of Manhattan is ruthless. Glass towers stretch toward the sky, filled with ambitious people climbing over each other for recognition. In this world, Rowan was king, featured on magazine covers, invited to exclusive investor dinners, treated like royalty wherever he went. His company, Leclerc Technologies, dominated headlines with its revolutionary software that promised to change how businesses operated globally. But every king needs someone to manage his kingdom, and that someone was Alina. She coordinated his schedule, managed his relationships, and quietly fixed his mistakes before anyone noticed them. When he forgot important meetings, she covered for him. When his presentations fell flat, she rewrote them overnight. When investors questioned his strategies, she provided the data that saved the deals. Yet when the company hit its billion-dollar valuation, when champagne flowed through the office and photographers captured every moment of triumph, Alina stood in the background holding his coat. She watched him accept congratulations for ideas she'd helped develop, for strategies she'd refined, for success she'd made possible. That night, while Rowan celebrated at an exclusive Manhattan restaurant with investors and board members, Alina sat in her small apartment in Queens, staring at her laptop screen. Her mother had called earlier, voice weak from chemotherapy, asking when Alina might visit. Soon, Mom, she'd promised, knowing it was a lie. There was always another crisis at Leclerc Technologies, always another fire to put out. She opened a blank document and began typing 2 words that would change everything: resignation letter. The next morning, she walked into Rowan's corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. He was on a call with a reporter from Forbes, gesturing animatedly as he described his vision for the future. She waited, holding the envelope that contained her carefully worded goodbye. When he finally hung up, he barely glanced at her. "Alina, I need you to reschedule the Goldman Sachs meeting. And call my tailor. I need the navy suit pressed for tomorrow's photo shoot." She placed the envelope on his mahogany desk. "I won't be here tomorrow, Rowan." He looked up then, confusion flickering across his features. "What do you mean?" "I'm resigning." The word hit him like cold water. For a moment, the man who commanded rooms full of powerful executives looked genuinely lost. "You can't be serious. We just hit $1 billion. This is when things get exciting. For you, maybe. But I've been invisible for 3 years, and I'm tired of disappearing." What happened next would shock everyone who knew the old Alina, the quiet, accommodating assistant who never made waves. She didn't cry, didn't beg for a counteroffer, didn't even raise her voice. She simply stood up, smoothed her skirt, and delivered the line that would haunt Rowan for months to come. "I built my career while building your brand. There's a difference." She walked out of that office with nothing, no severance package, no stock options, no safety net. Just a spine made of steel and a determination to prove that the woman everyone overlooked had been the most valuable person in the room all along. Before we dive into this incredible transformation story, I want to welcome you once more. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is, so we can shout you out in the next video. Please, enjoy the story. What Rowan didn't know was that Alina had been planning this moment for months. She'd been studying, networking, and preparing for the day she'd step out of his shadow and into her own light. She had a vision that went far beyond being someone's assistant, and she was about to show the world exactly what she was capable of. This is the story of how the invisible woman became unstoppable, how the overlooked assistant became the boss, and how sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything you were meant to be. It's about second chances, unexpected love, and the moment when someone finally sees you for who you really are. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you think about power, respect, and the quiet strength that lives inside every person who's ever been underestimated. The 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building housed Leclerc Technologies, where glass walls separated ambition from achievement, and where Alina Hart had perfected the art of being essential yet unseen. Her desk sat strategically outside Rowan's corner office, close enough to anticipate his needs, far enough to remain background noise in his daily symphony of success. At 6:30 a.m., while most of Manhattan still slept, Alina's heels clicked against the marble lobby as she entered the building. The security guard, Marcus, always greeted her with a warm smile. "Morning, Miss Hart. You're here early again." "Someone has to keep the empire running," she'd reply, though they both knew Rowan wouldn't arrive until 9. Her morning routine was choreographed precision. First, she'd review Rowan's calendar, cross-referencing it with his personal preferences. No meetings before 10 a.m. on Mondays. Always schedule lunch at La Bernardin. When entertaining Japanese investors, never book anything after 4 p.m. on Fridays when he played golf at his country club in the Hamptons. By 7 a.m., she'd have his coffee ready. Ethiopian single origin 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, and his daily briefing printed on cream-colored paper because he claimed digital screens gave him headaches. The briefing contained everything he needed to sound informed: market updates, competitor analysis, internal project statuses, and talking points for each meeting. Alina had learned to anticipate problems before they became crises. When the development team missed a crucial deadline, she'd already prepared alternative timelines. When a major client threatened to walk away, she'd researched their pain points and drafted solutions. When Rowan forgot his wedding anniversary, again, she'd ordered flowers, made dinner reservations, and ensured his wife received a heartfelt apology text that Alina had crafted. The office buzzed with the energy of a company on the rise. Leclerc Technologies had developed Cloud Sync, a revolutionary platform that allowed businesses to integrate all their software systems seamlessly. What had started as Rowan's graduate school project had evolved into a company with 200 employees and clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 500 corporations. Rowan commanded attention wherever he went. At 34, he possessed the kind of confidence that made investors open their checkbooks and competitors lose sleep. His presentations were legendary, not because of his technical expertise, but because of his ability to sell dreams. He painted visions of a future where businesses operated with unprecedented efficiency, where technology solved humanity's greatest challenges. What the audience didn't see was Alina in the back of the room, laptop open, ready to provide real-time data when his grand visions needed grounding in reality. She'd spent countless nights researching market trends, analyzing user feedback, and developing the strategic frameworks that made his ideas feasible. "Alina, I need the Peterson Industries proposal revised," Rowan would say, barely looking up from his phone. "They want more customization options, and the timeline needs to be aggressive. Can you handle that?" She'd nod, knowing handle that meant she'd spend the weekend rebuilding the entire proposal, consulting with the development team, and creating a presentation that would win the contract. When Peterson Industries signed a $2.3 million deal, the following week, Rowan received congratulations from the board. Alina received a brief good work in passing. Her workspace reflected her personality: organized, efficient, and deliberately unremarkable. A small succulent plant sat next to her monitor, the only personal touch in an otherwise sterile environment. She kept a notebook filled with project timelines, contact information, and ideas she developed but never shared. The margins contained sketches of process improvements and strategic initiatives that could revolutionize how the company operated. During board meetings, Alina sat in the corner taking notes, while Rowan presented quarterly results. She watched him field questions about market penetration and growth strategies, providing answers she'd helped him prepare. When board member Patricia Kellerman asked about customer retention rates, Rowan confidently cited statistics Alina had compiled the night before. "Impressive work, Rowan," Patricia said after the meeting. "Your strategic thinking continues to evolve." Alina gathered her materials silently, invisible to the praise being lavished on her boss. She'd learned not to expect recognition, but the sting never completely faded. The tech industry moved at breakneck speed, and staying ahead required constant innovation. Alina monitored competitor activities, tracked industry trends, and identified emerging opportunities. She'd discovered that their main competitor, TechFlow Solutions, was struggling with customer service issues, information that led to Leclerc Technologies poaching 3 major clients. Her days stretched from dawn to dusk, filled with crisis management and strategic planning. When a security breach threatened to expose client data, Alina coordinated with the IT team to implement emergency protocols, while Rowan was unreachable at a charity gala. When a key developer quit unexpectedly, she'd already identified potential replacements and scheduled interviews. The irony wasn't lost on her. She understood the business better than most executives, yet her title remained executive assistant. She'd earned an MBA from Columbia while working full-time, attending evening classes and writing papers during lunch breaks. Her thesis on organizational efficiency had received academic recognition, but in the office, she remained the person who ordered lunch and scheduled meetings. Rowan's success had become her full-time job, and she'd excelled at it with the dedication of someone building her own empire. Every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every brilliant idea she had contributed anonymously had been an investment in his future. She'd convinced herself that loyalty would eventually be rewarded, that her contributions would be acknowledged, that her value would be recognized. But as months turned into years, Alina began to realize that being indispensable to someone else's dream meant becoming invisible in her own life. She'd become so skilled at anticipating Rowan's needs that she'd forgotten to consider her own. The woman who could solve any business problem couldn't solve the growing emptiness in her chest. Standing at her desk each morning, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, Alina felt like she was watching life happen from behind glass, close enough to see everything, too far away to truly participate. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. Alina's phone buzzed against her nightstand, pulling her from the shallow sleep that had become her norm. The caller ID showed Mom, and her heart immediately clenched with worry. "Alina, honey." Her mother's voice was weak, strained. "I'm at Mount Sinai. The doctors want to run more tests." Alina sat up in her small Queens apartment, already calculating. She had 3 major presentations to finalize for Rowan's investor meetings, a contract negotiation with Microsoft scheduled for Thursday, and a board dinner she'd been planning for weeks. "What kind of tests, Mom? Are you okay?" "They found something during my routine mammogram. Probably nothing, but..." Alina Hart's voice trailed off, carrying the weight of unspoken fears. "I'll be right there," Alina said, already reaching for her clothes. "No, sweetheart. You have work. I know how important..." "Mom, stop. I'm coming." But even as she dressed, Alina's mind raced through her obligations. Rowan had a crucial meeting with venture capitalists at 9 a.m. The presentation wasn't finished, and he'd never managed the technical questions without her briefing notes. She grabbed her laptop, telling herself she could work from the hospital waiting room. At Mount Sinai, she found her mother looking smaller than usual, in the hospital gown, her graying hair pulled back with a rubber band. Alina Hart had raised Alina alone after her father left when she was 12, working double shifts as a nurse to pay for Alina's education. Now, at 62, she faced her own medical crisis with the same quiet strength she'd always shown. "The oncologist wants to see me Thursday," Alina said, gripping Alina's hand. "Dr. Martinez thinks it might be stage 2, but we won't know until after the biopsy." Thursday, the same day as the Microsoft negotiation that could secure Leclerc Technologies' biggest contract to date. Alina felt torn between 2 worlds, the daughter who wanted to support her mother, and the professional who couldn't let Rowan fail. "I'll be here," she promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her stomach. The next morning, Alina arrived at the office with dark circles under her eyes and coffee-stained notes from her hospital vigil. Rowan breezed in at 9:15, fresh from his morning workout, completely unaware that his assistant had spent the night in a medical facility. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, adjusting his Italian silk tie. "This Microsoft deal could change everything for us." "The presentation is on your desk," Alina replied, not mentioning that she'd finished it at 4 a.m. in a hospital cafeteria while her mother underwent preliminary tests. Throughout the day, Alina fielded calls from doctors' offices while managing Rowan's schedule. Between coordinating catering for the board dinner and reviewing legal documents, she researched oncologists and treatment options. Her notebook became a strange mix of business strategies and medical terminology. "Alina, can you push my lunch with Goldman Sachs to next week?" Rowan called from his office. "I want to squeeze in a round of golf with Peterson before our meeting." She rearranged his schedule, without complaint, even though it meant working through her own lunch break to accommodate the changes. While Rowan enjoyed 18 holes at his exclusive country club, Alina sat at her desk eating a granola bar and researching breast cancer survival rates. The pattern continued for weeks. Alina's diagnosis confirmed stage 2 breast cancer, requiring immediate chemotherapy and surgery. The treatment schedule conflicted with Leclerc Technologies' busiest quarter, product launch season, when Rowan needed her most. "I can drive you to treatments," Alina offered during one of her rushed evening visits to her mother's apartment in Astoria. "You work too hard already," Alina protested, though Alina could see the loneliness in her eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez next door said she'd help. Alina felt the familiar guilt that had become her constant companion. She was building someone else's empire while her own family needed her. Every missed dinner, every shortened phone call, every promise to visit next weekend accumulated like unpaid debts. The night before Elena's first chemotherapy session, Alina sat in her mother's kitchen, helping organize medications and preparing meals that could be frozen for later. Her phone buzzed constantly with work emergencies, a server crash that threatened the product launch, a key investor having second thoughts, a competitor trying to poach their biggest client. "Go," Alina said, watching her daughter's face tighten with each notification. "I know you need to handle this." "No, I'm staying tonight," Alina insisted, silencing her phone. But at 11 p.m., when Rowan called personally, something he rarely did, she found herself stepping onto the apartment balcony to take the call. "Alina, thank God. The entire system is down, and we have the TechCrunch demo tomorrow. I need you to coordinate with the development team and get this fixed." She looked through the window at her mother, who was pretending to read but clearly listening to every word. "I'll handle it," Alina said quietly. She spent the night on her laptop, managing the crisis remotely while her mother slept fitfully in the next room. By morning, the system was restored, the demo was saved, and Alina had dark circles that makeup couldn't hide. At the hospital, she held her mother's hand during the 4 insertion, her phone buzzing with congratulations about the successful product demo. Rowan had sent a brief text, "Great work on the crisis management. You're a lifesaver." But as she watched the chemotherapy drugs flow into her mother's veins, Alina wondered whose life she was actually saving. The months that followed blurred together, hospital visits squeezed between board meetings, medical consultations scheduled, around investor calls, and sleepless nights spent either caring for her mother or solving Rowan's latest crisis. She became an expert at compartmentalizing, switching between daughter and assistant with practiced efficiency. Rowan never asked about her personal life. He didn't notice when she arrived late after driving her mother to radiation appointments, or when she took calls from oncologists during lunch breaks. Her dedication to his success had made her indispensable, but it had also made her invisible as a human being with her own struggles and needs. The irony was crushing. She was helping build a technology company that promised to make people's lives easier, while her own life became increasingly difficult to manage. The champagne arrived at 3 p.m. on a crisp November afternoon, delivered by white-gloved servers, who transformed the 42nd floor into a celebration worthy of Wall Street legends. Leclerc Technologies had officially reached $1 billion valuation, and the entire tech world was watching. Alina stood near the reception desk, clipboard in hand, orchestrating the chaos with military precision. She'd spent 2 weeks planning this moment, coordinating with caterers, managing the guest list, ensuring every detail reflected Rowan's vision of success. The office buzzed with excitement as employees gathered around champagne towers and elaborate hors d'oeuvre stations. "Miss Hart, where should we set up the photographer?" asked James, the event coordinator she'd hired from Manhattan's most exclusive planning firm. "Corner office, natural lighting from the windows," she replied, checking items off her list. "Make sure the company logo is visible in every shot. Mr. Leclerc wants photos for the Forbes cover story." The guest list read like a who's who of New York's financial elite. Venture capitalists from Sand Hill Road had flown in specifically for this celebration. Board members mingled with tech journalists, while potential acquisition targets circulated through the crowd, hoping to catch Rowan's attention. Patricia Kellerman, the board's most influential member, approached Alina with a warm smile. "This is incredible, dear. You've outdone yourself with the arrangements." "Thank you, Miss Kellerman." Mr. Leclerc wanted everything perfect for the announcement. "Of course he did," Patricia chuckled. "But we both know who actually makes the magic happen around here." For a moment, Alina felt a flicker of recognition, but Patricia had already moved on to congratulate other executives. The comment hung in the air, acknowledged but not acted upon. Rowan emerged from his office, wearing a custom-tailored navy suit that Alina had picked up from his Savile Row tailor that morning. He moved through the crowd like a conductor leading an orchestra, each conversation building toward the crescendo of his announcement speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows with Manhattan's skyline as his backdrop. "Today marks a historic milestone for Leclerc Technologies. We've officially joined the billion-dollar club." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed as Rowan raised his champagne flute, his smile radiating the confidence that had made him a tech industry darling. He spoke about vision, innovation, and the future of business technology, weaving a narrative that made their success seem inevitable. "This achievement belongs to everyone in this room," he continued, gesturing broadly. "Our incredible team, our visionary board members, our supportive investors. Together, we've built something extraordinary." Alina watched from the back of the crowd, holding her own untouched champagne. She'd heard variations of this speech dozens of times, at board meetings, investor dinners, and industry conferences. The words were polished, inspiring, and completely devoid of specifics about how the success had actually been achieved. Michael Chen, the head of product development, leaned over to whisper in her ear, "You know half those strategies he's talking about came from your late-night brainstorming sessions, right?" She nodded, but said nothing. Michael was one of the few people who understood her actual contributions to the company's success. He'd been in those midnight meetings when Alina had proposed the customer retention program that increased their renewal rates by 40%. He'd seen her develop the competitive analysis framework that helped them win major contracts. "You should be up there with him," Michael added. "That's not my job," Alina replied, though the words tasted bitter. As the celebration continued, Alina found herself moving through the crowd like a ghost, ensuring everything ran smoothly while remaining largely unnoticed. She refilled champagne, glasses, directed photographers to better angles, and managed a constant stream of logistics that kept the event flowing seamlessly. A reporter from TechCrunch approached Rowan near the champagne fountain. "What's the secret to your rapid growth? How did you build such a successful company so quickly?" Rowan's answer was practiced perfection. "It's about having the right vision and surrounding yourself with talented people who share that vision. Success in tech requires relentless focus on innovation and customer needs." The reporter scribbled notes, completely unaware that the woman refilling his champagne glass had developed the customer feedback system that drove their product improvements. Alina had spent months analyzing user data, identifying pain points, and proposing solutions that became core features of their platform. "And what's next for Leclerc Technologies?" the reporter continued. "We're exploring acquisition opportunities and expanding into international markets," Rowan replied confidently. "The goal is to become the global standard for business integration software." Alina almost smiled at that. She'd been researching international expansion for 6 months, building relationships with potential partners in London, Tokyo, and Singapore. The acquisition targets he mentioned so casually were companies she'd identified and evaluated through countless hours of market analysis. As the afternoon wore on, the celebration took on a surreal quality. Alina watched Rowan accept congratulations for achievements she'd helped architect, listened to him, describe strategies she'd developed, and observed him charm investors with insights she'd provided. She felt like she was watching her own life from outside her body. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw the news about your company on Bloomberg. So proud of you, sweetheart. Hope you're celebrating." The message hit her like a physical blow. Her mother, fighting cancer with quiet dignity, was proud of a success that Alina couldn't even claim as her own. She stepped onto the outdoor terrace, needing air and space to process the overwhelming sense of disconnection. The November wind whipped through her hair as she looked out over Manhattan. Below, millions of people were living their own lives, pursuing their own dreams, building their own legacies. She felt envious of their autonomy, their ability to take credit for their own achievements. When she returned to the celebration, Rowan was posing for photos with the board members, his arm around Patricia Kellerman as they toasted the company's future. The photographer captured his triumphant smile, the moment of victory that would grace magazine covers and news articles. Alina stood in the background, holding her clipboard, invisible in the frame but essential to everything the camera captured. She realized with startling clarity that she'd become a supporting character in her own life story. And the recognition felt like waking up from a dream she hadn't realized she was having. The morning of December 15th started like any other, except for the cream-colored envelope tucked inside Alina's leather portfolio. She'd written and rewritten the resignation letter 7 times, each draft becoming more concise, more professional, more final. The words that had taken her months to find courage to write now felt inevitable. Rowan's corner office overlooked Central Park, where early morning joggers traced paths through the frost-covered landscape. He sat behind his mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. As he spoke to someone about the upcoming Forbes photo shoot, his Italian leather shoes were propped casually on the desk, and his expression carried the relaxed confidence of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. Absolutely, we want the cover story to focus on innovation and leadership, he was saying. Make sure they understand that Leclerc Technologies isn't just another tech company. We're revolutionizing how businesses operate. Alina stood in the doorway, waiting. She'd learned over 3 years that interrupting Rowan's calls was career suicide, even for urgent matters. So she waited, holding the envelope that contained her carefully crafted goodbye, watching him discuss his media strategy with the same enthusiasm he brought to everything that centered around his success. The call stretched on for 20 minutes. Rowan discussed photo angles, interview questions, and the narrative he wanted to present to the business world. He wanted to be portrayed as a visionary, a disruptor, a leader who'd built something extraordinary from nothing. The irony wasn't lost on Alina. She'd helped craft that very narrative through countless press releases and media briefings. Perfect. Let's make this the definitive piece on modern tech leadership, Rowan concluded, finally hanging up. He looked up at Alina with the distracted expression she knew well. What's on the agenda today? Please tell me you've handled the Goldman Sachs situation. The Goldman meeting is confirmed for Thursday, she replied, stepping into the office. But I need to discuss something else with you. Can it wait? I've got the Peterson Industries call in 10 minutes, and I still need to review the quarterly projections. He was already reaching for another file, his attention already shifting to the next item on his endless list of priorities. No, Rowan, it can't wait. Something in her tone made him look up. For the first time in months, she had his complete attention. She placed the envelope on his desk, directly in front of him, where he couldn't ignore it. What's this? He asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected. My resignation. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan stared at the envelope as if it were a foreign object, something that didn't belong in his carefully ordered world. When he finally opened it, his eyes scanned the brief, professional text with growing disbelief. You're serious about this, he said, not really a question. Completely serious. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Alina, if this is about money, we can discuss a raise. You've been valuable to the team, and I'm sure we can work something out. It's not about money. Then what? More vacation time, a better title? Executive assistant to the CEO sounds more impressive than... It's not about titles either. Rowan's confusion was genuine, and that somehow made it worse. He truly couldn't comprehend why she would want to leave. In his mind, working for him was the pinnacle of professional achievement. Being part of his success story should have been reward enough. I don't understand, he said, setting the letter down. We just hit $1 billion valuation. The company is growing faster than ever. This is when things get exciting, when we really start making our mark on the industry. Our mark? Alina asked quietly. Yes, our mark. You're part of this team, part of this success story. She almost laughed at that. Part of the team, but never part of the recognition. Part of the success, but never part of the celebration. Part of the story, but always in the footnotes. Where would you even go? Rowan continued, his tone shifting from confusion to something approaching condescension. You've built your entire career around this company, around supporting my vision. What other CEO would value your specific skill set the way I do? The question revealed everything about how he saw her, not as a professional with transferable skills and independent value, but as an extension of himself, a highly efficient tool that had been customized for his specific needs. You think I can't succeed without you, she said, and it wasn't a question. I think you've become very good at a very specific job. But the business world is competitive, Alina. Other companies might not appreciate the level of dedication and attention to detail that you bring. They might not understand how to utilize your talents effectively. His words were carefully chosen, designed to sound supportive, while actually undermining her confidence. It was a masterclass in manipulation disguised as concern, and Alina recognized it for exactly what it was. You're right about one thing, she said, standing up. I have become very good at a specific job. I've become excellent at making other people look brilliant while remaining invisible myself. That's not fair. I've always acknowledged your contributions. When have you ever publicly acknowledged my contributions? When have you ever mentioned my name in a board meeting or an interview? When have you ever given me credit for the strategies that built this company? Rowan's silence was answer enough. I've spent 3 years building your empire while neglecting my own life, she continued. I've missed family dinners, skipped vacations, and worked through holidays to make sure you never failed. And you know what I have to show for it? A salary and the privilege of watching you take credit for ideas we developed together. Alina, you're being emotional about this. Let's schedule a proper meeting next week when you've had time to think clearly. The dismissal was so casual, so automatic, that it crystallized everything she'd been feeling. Even now, as she tried to explain her decision to leave, he was treating her concerns as temporary hysteria that would pass with time and rational thought. I've been thinking clearly for months, she said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. This isn't an emotional decision, it's a strategic one. She moved toward the door, then paused and turned back to face him one final time. You asked where I would go. The truth is, I don't know yet. But I know I won't be here, making you look good while disappearing in the process. I built my career while building your brand, Rowan. There's a difference. The elevator descended 42 floors in complete silence. Alina stood with her back against the mirrored wall, watching the numbers decrease while her reflection stared. Back, professional blazer, perfectly styled hair, and eyes that held a mixture of terror and relief. In her hands, she carried a small cardboard box containing 3 years of her life, the succulent plant from her desk, a coffee mug her mother had given her, and a notebook filled with ideas she'd never shared. The lobby felt different as she walked through it for the last time. Marcus, the security guard, looked up from his desk with surprise. Leaving early today, Miss Hart? Leaving permanently, actually, she said, stopping at his desk. Take care of yourself, Marcus. His expression shifted from confusion to concern. You okay? You need me to call someone? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. She meant it, even though her hands were shaking. Outside, Manhattan moved at its usual relentless pace. Yellow cabs honked through traffic, pedestrians hurried along sidewalks, and the city's energy pulsed around her like a living thing. But for the first time in years, Alina wasn't rushing to solve someone else's crisis or manage someone else's schedule. She had nowhere urgent to be, and the freedom felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Her phone buzzed constantly during the subway ride to Queens. Text messages from colleagues who'd heard whispers about her departure, missed calls from vendors who needed approvals, and increasingly frantic messages from Rowan's calendar system as meetings approached without his usual preparation. She turned off the phone. At her apartment, Alina sat on her small couch and stared at the cardboard box. 3 years of dedication reduced to a few personal items. She thought about calling her mother, but Elena was at chemotherapy and Alina didn't want to worry her with news of unemployment during an already stressful time. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching something she'd never had time to explore: what came next. The first few hours were productive. She updated her LinkedIn profile, researched consulting opportunities, and began drafting a business plan for an idea that had been percolating in her mind for months. But as evening approached, doubt crept in like fog rolling off the East River. Her savings account contained enough money for 3 months of expenses, maybe 4, if she was careful. She had no job prospects, no safety net, and no guarantee that leaving Leclerc Technologies had been anything more than professional suicide disguised as courage. Her phone, when she finally turned it back on, contained 47 missed calls and 63 text messages. Most were work-related, vendors needing approvals, clients requesting information, and team members asking where she'd gone. But buried among the professional chaos were messages that revealed the immediate impact of her departure. Michael Chen from Product Development, heard you left. Rowan's been asking everyone where you put the Peterson Industries files. He seems genuinely lost. Sarah from Marketing, is it true you quit? The whole office is buzzing. Rowan called an emergency meeting and looked completely overwhelmed. Even Patricia Kellerman had sent a message. Heard about your departure. Would love to discuss opportunities when you're ready. But it was the message from Rowan himself that stopped her cold. Alina, I think we should discuss this rationally. You're making a mistake that will hurt both of us. Call me. The presumption in that message, that her decision somehow hurt him equally, revealed how little he understood about their professional relationship. She deleted it without responding. The next morning brought a different kind of message from Rowan. The Peterson Industries presentation is missing key data. I need the files you were working on. This is urgent. Then another, Alina, I can't find the Goldman Sachs contact information. Where did you store the client database? And another, the board meeting is tomorrow and I don't have the quarterly analysis. We need to talk immediately. Each message revealed another crack in the foundation she'd built around his success. Without her organizational systems, her institutional knowledge, and her ability to anticipate problems, Rowan was discovering how much of his efficiency had depended on her invisible labor. She responded to exactly one message. All files are on the shared server. Password is in the company directory. Good luck. The aftermath played out over the following weeks through industry gossip and social media updates. Leclerc Technologies' stock price dipped slightly when news of management changes reached investors. The Peterson Industries deal, which should have been a routine renewal, stalled when Rowan couldn't answer detailed questions about implementation timelines. The Goldman Sachs partnership, which Alina had been nurturing for months, went to a competitor after a disastrous presentation where Rowan seemed unprepared and unfocused. Michael Chen called her directly after the Goldman Sachs debacle. He's hired 3 different assistants in 2 weeks, he reported. None of them last more than a few days. He keeps comparing them to you and finding them inadequate. That's not my problem anymore, Alina replied, though she felt a small satisfaction at the validation. He's been asking about you. Wants to know if anyone has your contact information, if you've found another job yet. I think he's planning to try to get you back. He can plan all he wants. I'm not going back. But even as she said the words, Alina wondered if she was being naive. The job market was competitive, and her experience was heavily tied to one company, one industry, one very specific role. Maybe Rowan had been right about her limited options. Maybe she'd made a catastrophic mistake that would haunt her career for years. The doubt was strongest late at night, when she lay in bed calculating how long her savings would last, and wondering if pride was worth potential financial ruin. She'd given up security, benefits, and a steady paycheck for the uncertain promise of independence. Some nights, that trade felt foolish, but other nights, when she worked on her business plan or researched potential clients, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, excitement about her own future. For the first time since college, she was building something for herself rather than for someone else's benefit. The woman who had spent 3 years making Rowan Leclerc look brilliant was about to discover what she could accomplish when her talents were focused on her own success. The Starbucks on 42nd Street became Alina's first office, a far cry from the glass towers and mahogany desks of her previous life. She claimed a corner table each morning at 7 a.m., spreading her laptop, notebooks, and phone charger across the small surface like a general planning a campaign. The baristas knew her order: medium dark roast, no sugar, and the regulars had grown accustomed to seeing her there, typing furiously while commuters rushed past the windows. Her first freelance client came through a connection she'd almost forgotten. David Kim, a former Leclerc Technologies vendor who'd always appreciated her efficiency, reached out 3 weeks after her departure. His small logistics company was struggling with operational inefficiencies, and he remembered how she'd streamlined their contract negotiations. "I can't pay much," David admitted during their coffee meeting in Brooklyn. "Maybe $1,500 for the whole project. But if you can help us figure out why our delivery times are so inconsistent, it could save the business." $1,500. Less than she'd earned in a week at Leclerc Technologies, but it represented something more valuable than money, proof that her skills had value beyond Rowan's empire. She spent 2 weeks analyzing David's operations from her Starbucks table, interviewing drivers via video calls, and mapping delivery routes on her laptop screen. The problem wasn't complex. Their dispatch system was outdated, and drivers were making unnecessary trips due to poor route optimization. Her solution involved implementing new software and restructuring their scheduling protocols. When David's delivery times improved by 30% within a month, he recommended her to 3 other small business owners. Word spread slowly through Brooklyn's tight-knit entrepreneurial community. There was a consultant who understood operations, who didn't charge corporate rates, and who actually delivered results. But success came with its own challenges. Working from coffee shops meant competing for Wi-Fi bandwidth, dealing with noisy environments, and constantly moving when tables were needed for paying customers. Her back ached from hunching over small tables, and her phone battery died regularly from poor charging access. The financial reality was harsh. After paying rent on her Queens apartment, buying groceries, and covering her mother's medical expenses that insurance didn't handle, Alina's savings dwindled faster than anticipated. She started buying generic brands, skipping meals, and walking instead of taking the subway to save money. Her mother noticed during one of their weekly dinners at the small kitchen table in Astoria. "You're getting too thin, mija. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with the new business." Elena Hart studied her daughter's face, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised a child alone. "How much money do you have left?" "Enough," Elena lied. "Don't lie to your mother. I may be sick, but I'm not stupid." The truth came out over leftover Chinese takeout. Alina had 6 weeks of expenses remaining, 3 potential clients who might not sign contracts, and a growing fear that she'd made the biggest mistake of her professional life. "You could go back," Elena said gently. "There's no shame in admitting when something isn't working." "I can't go back, Mom. I won't go back." "Then you need to stop thinking small." Elena pulled out a worn notebook, the same one she'd used to track household expenses when Alina was growing up. "When your father left, I had 2 choices: feel sorry for myself or figure out how to build a better life for us. I chose to build." She opened the notebook to pages filled with business ideas, sketches, and financial projections. "I've been watching you work these past months. You're not just solving problems for these small companies, you're transforming them. But you're charging like you're desperate instead of charging like you're valuable." That conversation changed everything. Alina realized she'd been approaching freelancing with the mindset of someone grateful for scraps rather than someone offering premium expertise. She'd been undervaluing herself the same way Rowan had undervalued her, just from a different direction. Her next client meeting took place in a proper conference room at a WeWork space in Manhattan. The client was Rebecca Martinez, who owned a struggling design app called Creative Flow. The app had potential but was hemorrhaging users due to poor user experience and ineffective marketing. "I've heard you specialize in operational turnarounds," Rebecca said, sliding a folder across the table. "We're 3 months from bankruptcy. Can you help?" Instead of immediately accepting whatever fee Rebecca offered, Alina took time to study the company's financials, user data, and market position. She identified fundamental problems with their product positioning, customer acquisition strategy, and retention programs. "I can help," she said during their follow-up meeting. "But this isn't a quick fix. It's a complete strategic overhaul that will take 4 months and require significant changes to your operations." "How much?" $25,000, plus equity. "If we hit specific performance targets." Rebecca's eyes widened. It was 10 times what Alina had charged her previous clients, but she'd learned to price her expertise rather than her desperation. "That's a significant investment," Rebecca said. "So is bankruptcy," Alina replied calmly. "I'm not offering Band-Aid solutions, I'm offering transformation." Rebecca signed the contract that afternoon. The Creative Flow project became Alina's proving ground. She worked 18-hour days, but now those hours were invested in her own success, rather than someone else's. She redesigned their user onboarding process, developed a content marketing strategy that actually reached their target audience, and implemented customer feedback systems that drove product improvements. Within 2 months, Creative Flow's user retention improved by 60%. Within 4 months, their revenue had doubled. Rebecca was so impressed that she introduced Alina to other startup founders, and suddenly the woman who'd been working from coffee shops was fielding inquiries from companies with real budgets and serious growth potential. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. The woman who'd spent years making herself invisible was learning to advocate for her own value. The assistant who'd never taken credit was building a reputation based on measurable results. The employee who'd accepted whatever recognition others chose to give was creating her own success story. Late one evening, as she packed up her laptop at the WeWork space, Alina caught her reflection in the window. She looked different, more confident, more purposeful, more like someone who belonged in the room rather than someone grateful to be allowed in. The business registration paperwork sat on Alina's kitchen table in Queens, official and intimidating in its simplicity. Heartline Strategies LLC, 6 months after leaving Leclerc Technologies. She was finally ready to make her consulting work official. The name had come to her during a sleepless night, combining her surname with the idea of drawing clear lines between problems and solutions. Her first official client as Heartline Strategies wasn't a tech startup or corporate giant. It was Greenleaf Cafe, a struggling vegan restaurant in Park Slope, Brooklyn, owned by Maya Patel, a former investment banker who'd left Wall Street to follow her passion for sustainable food. Maya had contacted Alina through a referral from David Kim, whose logistics company was now thriving after her operational overhaul. "I've got great food, a prime location, and passionate staff," Maya explained during their initial meeting at the cafe. "But I'm bleeding money and I can't figure out why." The cafe occupied a corner spot on Fifth Avenue with large windows and exposed brick walls that should have attracted the neighborhood's health-conscious professionals. But at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, only 3 tables were occupied, and the staff looked bored behind an elaborate juice bar that clearly wasn't generating much business. Alina spent her first week observing operations without making suggestions. She arrived early to watch the morning rush, stayed through lunch to analyze customer flow, and returned for dinner service to understand the full operational cycle. What she discovered was a business trying to be everything to everyone while excelling at nothing specific. The menu was overwhelming, 47 items ranging from raw food bowls to elaborate vegan desserts. The ordering process was confusing, with customers unsure whether to seat themselves or wait to be seated. The pricing seemed arbitrary, with some items significantly overpriced, while others were clearly losing money. "You're not running a restaurant," Alina told Maya during their strategy session. "You're running 3 different businesses that happen to share the same space: a juice bar, a casual cafe, and a fine dining establishment. Your customers don't know what to expect, and your staff doesn't know what to prioritize." Maya's face fell. "I wanted to offer options for every dietary preference and lifestyle. Noble goal, but it's killing your profitability. We need to identify your core customer and build everything around serving them exceptionally well." Alina's analysis revealed that Greenleaf's most profitable customers were local professionals who wanted quick, healthy lunch options. They appreciated quality ingredients but needed efficient service that fit into busy schedules. The elaborate dinner menu and extensive juice offerings were distracting from this core opportunity. Her strategic plan was comprehensive but focused. First, streamline the menu to 15 signature items that could be prepared quickly and consistently. Second, implement a clear ordering system with designated pickup areas for different service types. Third, redesign the space to optimize traffic flow and reduce wait times. The menu restructuring was the most challenging part. Maya had emotional attachments to dishes that reflected her culinary vision, but weren't commercially viable. Alina helped her understand that business success would give her more opportunities to experiment, not fewer. "We're not eliminating creativity," Alina explained as they reviewed sales data. "We're creating a foundation that supports creativity. Once you're profitable, you can introduce seasonal specials and test new concepts without risking the core business." They reduced the menu to 12 lunch items, 3 breakfast options, and 5 beverages. Each item was designed to use overlapping ingredients, reducing waste and simplifying inventory management. The new menu could be executed by a smaller kitchen staff, reducing labor costs while improving consistency. The operational changes were equally important. Alina redesigned the customer journey from entry to exit, creating clear signage that guided people through the ordering process. She implemented a mobile ordering system that allowed regular customers to skip lines during busy periods. She even repositioned furniture to create better traffic flow and more intimate seating arrangements. The marketing strategy focused on building a loyal lunch crowd rather than trying to attract every possible customer. Alina helped Maya develop partnerships with nearby offices, offering catering services and group discounts. They created a loyalty program that rewarded frequent visitors and encouraged word-of-mouth referrals. The transformation took 6 weeks to implement fully. During the transition, there were challenging days when regular customers complained about missing menu items, and staff struggled to adapt to new procedures. Maya questioned whether the changes were too drastic, too fast. "Change is uncomfortable," Alina reminded her during a particularly difficult week. "But staying the same was killing your business slowly. At least now we're moving towards something better." The results spoke for themselves. Within 2 months, lunch revenue had increased by 80%. Average order value rose as customers could make decisions more quickly and confidently. Staff productivity improved dramatically as they could focus on executing a smaller number of items excellently, rather than struggling with an unwieldy menu. The most telling metric was customer return rate. Before the changes, most customers visited Greenleaf once and never returned. After the restructuring, 40% of customers became regular visitors, creating a stable revenue base that allowed Maya to plan for growth rather than just survival. Maya's success story became Alina's first major case study. She documented the entire process, from initial analysis through implementation and results measurement. The case study became a powerful marketing tool that demonstrated her ability to transform struggling businesses through strategic thinking and operational excellence. More importantly, the Greenleaf Project established Alina's methodology for business transformation. She learned to balance data analysis with human psychology, understanding that successful change required both logical strategy and emotional buy-in from business owners and staff. The project also taught her about pricing her services appropriately. Maya had been willing to pay premium rates for results, and the dramatic improvement in her business justified every dollar of Alina's fee. This experience gave Alina confidence to charge what her expertise was worth rather than what desperate clients could afford. Word of Greenleaf's transformation spread through Brooklyn's small business community. Maya became an enthusiastic advocate, referring other struggling entrepreneurs to Heartline strategies. The cafe itself became an unofficial showcase for Alina's work, with Maya proudly telling customers about the consultant who'd saved her business. 6 months after the project's completion, Greenleaf had expanded to include a small retail section selling packaged versions of their most popular items. Maya was considering opening a second location, a possibility that had seemed impossible during their first meeting. Standing in the bustling cafe during the lunch rush, watching efficient staff serve satisfied customers, Alina felt something she'd never experienced at Leclerc Technologies: pride in work that bore her name and reflected her vision. The success at Greenleaf Cafe opened doors that Alina hadn't expected. Within 3 months of Maya's transformation, Heartline Strategies had a waiting list of potential clients, each referred by someone who'd witnessed the dramatic turnaround in Brooklyn. But it was the call from Marcus Rodriguez at Atlantic Logistics that marked Alina's entry into larger, more complex business challenges. Atlantic Logistics operated from a warehouse complex in Long Island City, managing supply chain operations for mid-sized retailers across the Northeast. Marcus had built the company from a single truck operation into a 50-employee business, but growth had brought problems he couldn't solve alone. "We're drowning in our own success," Marcus explained during their first meeting in his cluttered office overlooking the warehouse floor. "Orders are up 40% from last year, but our delivery times are getting worse, not better. Customers are threatening to leave, and I don't understand why adding more trucks and drivers isn't fixing the problem." Alina spent a week embedded with Atlantic's operations, riding along with drivers, observing warehouse procedures and analyzing their dispatch systems. What she discovered was a company that had scaled up without scaling smart. They'd added capacity without improving coordination, resulting in a chaotic system where more resources actually created more inefficiency. The core problem was information flow. Drivers received assignments through a combination of radio calls, text messages, and handwritten notes. The warehouse team operated on different software than the dispatch office. Customer service representatives had no real-time visibility into delivery status, leading to frustrated clients and repeated phone calls that consumed staff time. "You're not running a logistics company," Alina told Marcus during her presentation. "You're running 50 individual delivery operations that happen to share the same parking lot. There's no central nervous system connecting all the moving parts." Her solution involved implementing an integrated management system that connected every aspect of the operation. Drivers would receive assignments through mobile apps that optimized routes automatically. Warehouse staff would scan packages that updated delivery status in real time. Customer service would have complete visibility into every shipment, allowing them to provide accurate information and proactive updates. The technology implementation was only part of the challenge. Alina had to redesign workflows that had evolved organically over years of growth. She created new training protocols, established performance metrics, and developed communication systems that kept everyone aligned around common goals. The resistance was immediate and intense. Veteran drivers complained about learning new technology. Warehouse supervisors worried that increased visibility would expose inefficiencies they'd been hiding. Office staff feared that automation would eliminate their jobs. "Change management is harder than strategy development," Alina explained to Marcus. During a particularly difficult week, when 3 drivers had threatened to quit, people resist change because they're afraid of losing what they know, even when what they know isn't working. She addressed the resistance through a combination of training, incentives, and transparent communication. Drivers who embraced the new system received bonuses for improved efficiency. Warehouse staff were promoted to team leader roles that leveraged their experience while incorporating new procedures. Office staff were retrained for higher value activities, like customer relationship management and business development. The transformation took 4 months, but the results were dramatic. Average delivery times improved by 35%. Customer complaints dropped by 60%. Most importantly, Atlantic could handle increased volume without proportional increases in staff or vehicles, dramatically improving profitability. Marcus was so impressed that he introduced Alina to the Northeast Logistics Association, where she presented Atlantic's case study to an audience of industry executives. The presentation generated immediate interest from companies facing similar scaling challenges. Her next major client came from that presentation. Creative Flow, the design app company she'd worked with as a freelancer, had grown rapidly but was struggling with user retention and monetization. Rebecca Martinez, now the CEO of a company with 2 million users, needed help transitioning from startup to sustainable business. "We've proven that people want our product," Rebecca explained during their strategy session in Creative Flow's new Soho office. "But we can't figure out how to make money from them consistently. Our user acquisition costs are rising, and our lifetime value isn't keeping pace." Alina's analysis revealed a company that had focused intensely on growth metrics while neglecting business fundamentals. They were acquiring users through expensive advertising campaigns, but losing them quickly due to poor onboarding experiences. Their freemium model was too generous, giving away premium features without compelling users to upgrade. The solution required restructuring their entire customer journey. Alina redesigned the onboarding process to demonstrate value immediately while creating natural upgrade points. She developed a content strategy that educated users about advanced features through tutorials and case studies. Most importantly, she implemented analytics systems that tracked user behavior and identified intervention points where personalized outreach could prevent churn. The monetization strategy was equally comprehensive. Instead of hoping users would discover premium features organically, Alina created guided experiences that showcased advanced capabilities during natural workflow moments. She developed tiered pricing that aligned with different user segments and usage patterns. The project required close collaboration with Creative Flow's product development team. Alina found herself working alongside engineers and designers, translating business strategy into user experience improvements. It was challenging work that required both analytical thinking and creative problem solving. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 6 months, user retention improved by 70%. Premium subscription rates doubled. Most importantly, the lifetime value of new users increased enough to support sustainable growth without constant fundraising. Rebecca's success story became another powerful case study, but it also established Alina's reputation in the tech industry. Creative Flow's investors began referring other portfolio companies to Heartline Strategies. Tech blogs wrote about the consultant who saved Creative Flow, and Alina found herself invited to speak at industry conferences. The speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities with larger companies. A fashion e-commerce startup needed help with inventory management. A food delivery service wanted to improve driver retention. A B2B software company was struggling with customer acquisition costs. Each project taught Alina something new about business strategy and change management. She developed frameworks that could be adapted across industries while learning to customize her approach for different company cultures and market conditions. More importantly, she was building a reputation based on measurable results rather than corporate politics. Clients hired Heartline Strategies because they needed problems solved, not because they needed to maintain relationships or navigate office dynamics. Success was measured in revenue growth, cost reduction, and operational efficiency, metrics that couldn't be manipulated or misinterpreted. By the end of her first year as an official business, Alina had completed 12 major projects with a 100% client satisfaction rate. Her average project fee had increased from $1,500 to $25,000, and she was turning down opportunities that didn't align with her strategic focus. The elevator opened onto the 15th floor of a glass tower in Lower Manhattan, revealing the polished reception area of Heartline Strategies. The company logo, clean, modern typography in deep blue, dominated the wall behind a sleek reception desk where Jennifer Chen greeted visitors with the kind of professional warmth that made clients feel both welcomed and impressed. Alina walked through her office each morning with a sense of accomplishment that still felt surreal. 2 years after working from coffee shops and her mother's kitchen table, she employed 12 full-time consultants, occupied 2 floors of prime Manhattan real estate, and maintained a client waiting list that stretched 3 months into the future. The transformation had been methodical, but rapid. After her success with Atlantic Logistics and Creative Flow, Alina realized she couldn't handle the growing demand alone. Her first hire was David Park, a former McKinsey consultant who'd grown tired of corporate bureaucracy and wanted to work with smaller, more agile companies. David brought analytical rigor and project management expertise that allowed Heartline to take on larger, more complex engagements. The second hire was Maria Santos, an operations specialist who'd spent 5 years optimizing manufacturing processes for Fortune 500 companies. Maria's background in lean methodology and process improvement complemented Alina's strategic thinking, creating a powerful combination that could address both high-level strategy and detailed implementation. As the team grew, Alina developed a hiring philosophy based on complementary skills rather than similar backgrounds. She recruited Sarah Kim, a former startup founder, who understood the emotional challenges of business transformation. She hired James Wright, a data scientist who could identify patterns in complex business operations. She brought on Lisa Rodriguez, a change management expert, who specialized in helping teams adapt new processes and technologies. Each new hire expanded Heartline's capabilities while maintaining the boutique feel that differentiated them from larger consulting firms. Clients worked directly with senior consultants rather than junior analysts. Projects were customized rather than templated. Results were measured in business outcomes rather than billable hours. The office space reflected this philosophy. Instead of traditional cubicles or corporate conference rooms, Heartline's workspace featured collaborative areas where teams could spread out, project materials, quiet zones for focused analysis, and comfortable meeting spaces where clients felt like partners rather than customers. The company's reputation had grown through a combination of exceptional results and strategic networking. Alina spoke regularly at industry conferences, sharing insights about business transformation and operational excellence. Her presentations were always grounded in real case studies with measurable outcomes, making her a sought-after speaker who attracted potential clients rather than just academic interest. The Harvard Business Review had published her article about scaling small businesses, which generated inquiries from companies across the country. Forbes included her in their 30 Under 30 list for consulting, recognizing her innovative approach to business strategy. The recognition was gratifying, but more importantly, it established Heartline Strategies as a serious player in the consulting industry. Client diversity had become one of Heartline's greatest strengths. The portfolio included everything from family-owned restaurants to venture-backed startups, from manufacturing companies to digital agencies. This variety kept the work interesting while building expertise across multiple industries and business models. One of their most successful recent projects involved TechFlow Manufacturing, a New Jersey company that produced components for medical devices. The company had been profitable for 20 years, but was losing market share to overseas competitors with lower labor costs. Traditional consulting firms had recommended downsizing or relocating operations, but Alina saw an opportunity for strategic repositioning. Instead of competing on price, Heartline helped TechFlow compete on speed and customization. They redesigned manufacturing processes to enable rapid prototyping and small batch production, allowing the company to serve clients who needed quick turnarounds and specialized components. They developed partnerships with medical device startups who valued domestic production and close collaboration. The transformation took 8 months, but TechFlow emerged as a premium supplier with higher margins and more stable client relationships. Their revenue increased by 40%, while their workforce grew by 15%, exactly the opposite of what traditional cost-cutting approaches would have achieved. Success stories like TechFlow had established Heartline's reputation for finding creative solutions to complex business challenges. Clients came to them not just for operational improvements, but for strategic thinking that could redefine their competitive position. The financial success was equally impressive. Heartline's revenue had grown from Alina's initial freelance income of $30,000 to over $2 million annually. More importantly, the business was profitable and sustainable, with long-term client relationships that provided predictable revenue streams. Alina had learned to balance growth with quality, turning down projects that didn't align with their expertise or values. She developed a rigorous client screening process that ensured good cultural fit and realistic expectations. Not every business problem could be solved through consulting, and Alina had learned to identify situations where Heartline could make a meaningful difference. The team had developed specialized practices around different types of business challenges. David led the technology integration practice, helping companies implement new systems and processes. Maria focused on operational efficiency, working with manufacturers and logistics companies. Sarah specialized in startup scaling, helping founders navigate the transition from entrepreneurial chaos to sustainable business operations. Industry recognition had brought opportunities beyond traditional consulting. Alina served on the advisory board of 3 startups, providing strategic guidance in exchange for equity stakes. She'd been invited to guest lecture at Columbia Business School, sharing real-world insights with MBA students. Several venture capital firms consulted with Heartline when evaluating potential investments, valuing their ability to assess operational capabilities and growth potential. The success had also allowed Alina to give back to the community that had supported her early growth. Heartline provided pro bono consulting services to minority-owned businesses and women entrepreneurs, helping level the playing field for founders who couldn't afford premium consulting fees. These projects were often the most rewarding, combining business impact with social mission. Standing in her corner office overlooking the Hudson River, Alina reflected on the journey from invisible assistant to recognized business leader. The view from the 15th floor was spectacular, but the real satisfaction came from building something meaningful, a company that solved real problems, employed talented people, and created value for clients and community alike. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, 3 p.m., new client consultation. She smiled, gathering her materials for another opportunity to help a business transform itself. Some things never changed. She still loved solving complex problems and helping others succeed. The difference was that now, she was building her own legacy while doing it. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, buried among the usual flood of client inquiries and partnership proposals that filled Alina's inbox. Jennifer, her assistant, had flagged it as urgent, though the sender's name made Alina's coffee cup pause halfway to her lips. Leclerc Technologies, Consulting request read the subject line, and below it, an email from someone named Patricia Kellerman, requesting a meeting to discuss strategic consulting services for operational restructuring and growth strategy optimization. Alina stared at the screen for a full minute before the irony hit her. Patricia Kellerman, the board member who'd once complimented her event planning skills, while Rowan took credit for billion-dollar valuations. Now Patricia was reaching out to Heartline Strategies, apparently unaware that the consultant she was seeking was the same assistant she'd barely noticed 3 years ago. The email was professionally written, outlining Leclerc Technologies' current challenges without revealing specific details. User growth had stagnated. Investor confidence was wavering. The board was seeking fresh perspective from proven strategic consultants. With a track record of transforming underperforming businesses, Alina forwarded the email to David Park with a single line. Thoughts on this potential client? David's response came within minutes. Leclerc Tech? They've been in the news lately. Not good news. Stock price down 30%, key executives leaving, rumors about acquisition talks. Could be interesting if they're serious about change. Big enough to be a significant engagement. She spent the afternoon researching Leclerc Technologies' recent performance. The company that had once dominated tech headlines was now struggling with the kind of problems she specialized in solving. Their cloud sync platform faced increased competition from more agile startups. Customer acquisition costs had risen while retention rates declined. The innovative culture that had driven their early success had calcified into bureaucratic inefficiency. Most telling were the leadership changes. 3 senior executives had left in the past year, including the head of product development and the chief marketing officer. Industry analysts were questioning whether Rowan Leclerc still had the vision to guide the company he'd founded. Alina scheduled the initial consultation for the following Thursday, treating it like any other potential client engagement. She prepared her standard presentation about Heartline's methodology, gathered case studies that demonstrated relevant experience, and briefed her team on the company's background and challenges. What she didn't prepare for was the moment Patricia Kellerman walked into the conference room, followed by Rowan Leclerc himself. He looked different, older certainly, but also somehow smaller than she remembered. The confident swagger that had once filled every room was replaced by something more cautious, more uncertain. His expensive suit still fit perfectly, but he wore it like armor rather than a statement of success. Patricia made the introductions with the smooth professionalism of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. Miss Hart, thank you for meeting with us. I believe you may have worked with Leclerc Technologies previously? I did, Alina replied evenly, watching Rowan's face as recognition dawned. I was Mr. Leclerc's executive assistant for 3 years. The silence that followed was profound. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly as she processed this information, while Rowan seemed to be struggling with something between embarrassment and disbelief. Well, Patricia said finally, that certainly explains why your preliminary assessment of our challenges was so accurate. Rowan found his voice. Alina, I had no idea you were, when Patricia mentioned Heartline Strategies, I didn't realize that I was the consultant you needed. She finished. I can understand the confusion. Patricia, clearly a woman who didn't waste time on awkward personal dynamics, opened her folder and got straight to business. Ms. Hart, we're facing significant operational challenges that require immediate attention. Our board has reviewed your track record with companies like Creative Flow and Atlantic Logistics. We believe your expertise in business transformation could be exactly what Leclerc Technologies needs. Alina listened as Patricia outlined the company's problems with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent months analyzing declining performance metrics. User engagement was down 25%. Customer acquisition costs had doubled while lifetime value remained flat. Employee satisfaction surveys revealed widespread concerns about company direction and leadership effectiveness. We need someone who can assess our operations objectively and recommend strategic changes, Patricia continued. Someone who understands our industry but isn't emotionally invested in maintaining the status quo. Throughout the presentation, Rowan remained largely silent occasionally, nodding or providing clarification when Patricia asked direct questions. The man who had once dominated every conversation now seemed content to let others lead the discussion. When Patricia finished, she looked directly at Alina. Are you interested in taking on this engagement? Alina glanced at Rowan, who was studying his hands with unusual intensity. I'd need to understand the scope of authority. I'd have to implement recommendations. Transformation requires more than analysis. It requires the ability to make difficult changes that may challenge existing assumptions and practices. You'd have full board support, Patricia assured her. We're past the point of incremental adjustments. We need fundamental change, and we're prepared to support whatever recommendations you make, even if those recommendations involve significant changes to current leadership structures or operational procedures. Patricia's smile was sharp, especially if they involve those changes. Rowan looked up then, meeting Alina's eyes for the first time since the meeting began. I know this is unusual, but we need help, and Patricia tells me you're the best at what you do. The admission seemed to cost him something. This was the man who had once dismissed her resignation as emotional decision-making, who had questioned whether she could succeed without his brand to support her. Now he was sitting in her conference room, asking for her expertise to save the company he'd built. I'll need complete access to financial records, operational data, and staff interviews, Alina said. I'll also need the authority to observe board meetings and executive decision-making processes. Done, Patricia said immediately. And I'll need Mr. Leclerc's commitment to participate fully in the assessment process, including honest evaluation of his own leadership effectiveness. This time the silence stretched longer. Rowan's jaw tightened slightly, but when he spoke his voice was steady. Whatever you need. Alina opened her notebook and began writing. Then let's discuss terms. The first strategy meeting took place in Leclerc Technologies' main conference room, the same glass-walled space, where Alina had once sat silently taking notes, while Rowan commanded the attention of board members and investors. Now she stood at the head of the mahogany table, presenting her preliminary findings to a room full of executives who hung on her every word. Your core problem isn't technical, it's cultural, she began, clicking through slides that displayed user engagement metrics, employee satisfaction scores, and competitive analysis data. Leclerc Technologies has become a company that talks about innovation while punishing creative risk-taking. Rowan sat 3 seats down from the head of the table, a position that would have been unthinkable during his years of absolute authority. He took notes in a leather portfolio, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never challenging her conclusions or attempting to redirect the conversation. Can you elaborate on the risk-taking issue? Asked Jennifer Walsh, the interim head of product development who'd replaced the executive who'd left 6 months earlier. Alina pulled up a slide showing product development timelines. Your average feature release cycle has increased from 6 weeks to 4 months over the past 2 years, not because the features are more complex, but because they require approval from 7 different stakeholders before implementation. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a flowchart of the current decision-making process. A junior developer with an idea for improving user experience has to present to their team lead, who presents to the department manager, who presents to the product committee, who presents to the executive team, who presents to the board for final approval. That's standard corporate governance, protested Marcus Thompson, the chief financial officer. That's innovation paralysis, Alina countered. Your competitors are releasing updates weekly while you're still debating whether to change button colors. Rowan shifted in his seat. What do you recommend? The question was asked without defensiveness or challenge, a simple request for professional guidance. Alina found herself momentarily surprised by his tone, so different from the dismissive authority she remembered. Decentralized decision-making with clear accountability metrics, she replied. Teams should have authority to implement changes that affect their specific areas, with oversight focused on results rather than pre-approval processes. She spent the next hour outlining a restructured organizational chart that eliminated redundant approval layers while maintaining strategic oversight. The plan required significant changes to how Leclerc Technologies operated, including modifications to Rowan's own role as CEO. Under this structure, the CEO focuses on vision and external relationships while department heads have operational autonomy within defined parameters, she explained. It requires trusting your team to make good decisions rather than controlling every decision they make. After the meeting, Rowan approached her as she packed up her materials. Can we talk privately? They walked to his office, the same corner space where she'd once delivered his coffee and managed his calendar. The mahogany desk was still there, but the space felt different, less like a throne room and more like a workspace where actual work happened. "This is strange for me," he admitted, settling into one of the chairs facing his desk rather than behind it, taking direction instead of giving it. "Is it difficult?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly, it's a relief." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from stressful moments during her assistant days. "I've been making decisions I wasn't qualified to make for years, hoping no one would notice. Having someone who actually knows what they're doing, it's like finally admitting I need glasses after years of squinting." Over the following weeks, Alina implemented changes with methodical precision. She restructured team hierarchies, eliminated redundant meetings, and established performance metrics that rewarded results rather than process compliance. Each change required careful coordination with department heads, many of whom were initially resistant to modifications that reduced their authority. Rowan's role in the transformation was unlike anything she'd expected. Instead of fighting to maintain control, he actively supported her recommendations, even when they diminished his direct oversight of daily operations. During team meetings, he deferred to her expertise, asking thoughtful questions rather than making pronouncements. "Alina suggests we pilot the new approval process with the mobile app updates," he said during one executive meeting. "I think we should follow her recommendation and evaluate results after 30 days. The reversal was noticed by everyone. Sarah Kim from Heartline's team, who was working on employee engagement initiatives, pulled Alina aside after observing a particularly collaborative planning session. "Is that the same CEO who used to ignore your contributions?" Sarah asked. "Because the guy in there just spent 20 minutes asking for your input on strategic priorities." "People can change," Alina replied, though she was still processing the transformation herself. The most telling moment came during a crisis that would have once triggered Rowan's micromanagement instincts. A security vulnerability in CloudSync's authentication system threatened to expose client data, requiring immediate response to prevent potential breaches. In the past, Rowan would have taken personal control of the crisis, making rapid decisions and demanding constant updates from every team member. Instead, he called Alina first. "We have a security issue that needs immediate attention," he said, his voice tense but controlled. "What's our protocol for this kind of situation?" She arrived at the office within an hour to find Rowan coordinating with the technical team while following the crisis management procedures she'd established. He provided updates when requested, but avoided the kind of frantic oversight that had once characterized his leadership during emergencies. "The security team has isolated the vulnerability," he reported when she entered the war room they'd set up in the main conference area. "Legal is preparing client notifications, and PR is drafting a transparency statement. I've been following the communication timeline you outlined. The crisis was resolved within 6 hours with minimal client impact and no data breaches. More importantly, the response demonstrated that Leclerc Technologies could handle major challenges without reverting to the chaotic decision-making that had previously characterized their operations." During the post-crisis debrief, Rowan's reflection surprised everyone in the room. 3 years ago, I would have made this situation worse by trying to control every detail personally. Having clear procedures and trusting the team to execute them made all the difference. Patricia Kellerman, who had observed the crisis response remotely, sent Alina a private message. "Remarkable transformation, not just in procedures, but in leadership mindset. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." The comment highlighted something Alina was beginning to understand. She wasn't just consulting on business operations. She was helping Rowan learn to lead differently, and he was proving surprisingly willing to follow her guidance. The Heartline Strategies office was quiet at 8 p.m. on a Friday evening in late April. Most of the team had left hours earlier, but Alina remained at her desk, reviewing the final implementation reports for Leclerc Technologies transformation. 6 weeks of intensive restructuring had yielded remarkable results. User engagement was up 18%, employee satisfaction had improved dramatically, and the company's stock price had begun recovering from its earlier decline. She was so absorbed in the data that she didn't notice Rowan standing in her doorway until he cleared his throat softly. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, holding 2 coffee cups from the artisanal shop downstairs. "I thought you might need caffeine for the late-night work session." She looked up, surprised. "How did you know I was still here?" "I saw the lights from the street. Old habits. I used to drive past the Leclerc building at night to see who was working late. He stepped into her office, offering one of the cups. Ethiopian single origin, 2 sugars, splash of oat milk. Some things you don't forget. The fact that he remembered her coffee order after 3 years struck her as both touching and slightly unsettling. She accepted the cup, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Thank you. What brings you here so late? I wanted to talk before we finalize the engagement next week, he said, settling into the chair with an uncertainty that was still strange to see. Away from conference rooms and formal presentations, just, honestly. Alina saved her work and closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. The office's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan's evening lights, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt far removed from their professional interactions of recent weeks. I owe you an apology, Rowan began, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. Not just for how I treated you when you resigned, but for 3 years of taking you for granted. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, watching you work, seeing what you've built here. He paused, looking out at the city lights before continuing. I never asked what you wanted back then. I never asked about your ideas, your goals, your life, outside of making mine easier. I treated you like a very sophisticated piece of office equipment. You weren't malicious about it, Alina said carefully. You were just focused on other things. That's generous, but it's not an excuse. He met her eyes directly. I was so convinced of my own importance that I couldn't see the people who were actually making me successful, especially you. The admission hung between them, honest and raw, in a way that their previous interactions had never been. Alina found herself studying his face, looking for signs of the arrogant CEO she'd once known, and finding someone genuinely different. What changed? She asked. Failure, he said with a rueful smile. Spectacular, humbling failure. After you left, everything started falling apart slowly, then quickly. I kept thinking I could fix it myself, that I just needed to work harder, be smarter, make better decisions. It took me 2 years to realize that the problem wasn't my effort, it was my approach. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Watching you work these past weeks has been like seeing a master class in leadership. The way you listen to people, the way you build consensus while maintaining clear direction, the way you make everyone feel heard and valued. I never learned how to do any of that. You're learning now, she observed. Because I have a good teacher. The words carried weight beyond their professional context. You could have taken this consulting engagement and humiliated me, made me pay for every slight, every overlooked contribution. Instead, you've helped me become better at the job I thought I already knew how to do. Alina sipped her coffee, processing the vulnerability in his voice. Revenge would have been satisfying for about 5 minutes. Building something better is satisfying for years. Is that what this is? Building something better? The question carried multiple layers of meaning. They were talking about business transformation, but also about the relationship between them, professional, personal, and something undefined that existed in the space between. I think so, she said. Your company's going to be stronger because of these changes. Your leadership is more effective. Your team is more engaged. That's better for everyone. And us? Is there an us to build something better with? The directness of the question surprised her. She'd been so focused on maintaining professional boundaries that she hadn't allowed herself to consider the personal dynamics that had been shifting throughout their work together. I don't know, she answered honestly. 3 years ago, you were my boss who barely saw me as a person. 6 weeks ago, you were a potential client who needed my expertise. Now, I'm not sure what we are. I'd like to find out, he said quietly. Not as CEO and consultant, not as boss and employee, as equals who respect each other and might want to explore what that could mean. She studied his face, looking for traces of the manipulation or calculated charm she'd once witnessed him use with investors and board members. Instead, she saw genuine uncertainty, hope, and something that looked like fear of rejection. That would require starting completely over, she said. No history, no assumptions, no power dynamics from before. I'd like that. A clean slate. It would mean accepting that I'm not the same person who used to manage your calendar and fix your mistakes. I'm not going to disappear into someone else's shadow again. I wouldn't want you to. The woman who built this company, who transformed my business, who commands respect from everyone she works with, That's who I want to know better. Alina felt something shift inside her chest, a cautious warmth that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It would be complicated. We'd have to navigate professional boundaries, industry relationships, the fact that half of Manhattan knows our history. Complicated doesn't mean impossible, he said. And I've learned that the best things usually are complicated. She smiled then, the first genuinely relaxed expression she'd shared with him since their reunion. I suppose we could start with dinner, somewhere that's not a business meeting. I'd like that very much. As they sat in her office, surrounded by the evidence of her success and the promise of something new, Alina realized that sometimes the most unexpected transformations were the most meaningful ones. Before you go, I want to hear from you. This story of transformation and second chances isn't just entertainment. It is a reminder that we all have untapped potential waiting to be unleashed. Drop a comment below and tell us, what's one dream or goal you've been putting on hold because someone made you feel like you weren't capable enough? Maybe it's starting your own business, switching careers, or finally pursuing that passion project you've been thinking about for years. Your story matters, and this community is here to support each other. When you share your dreams in the comments, you're not just inspiring yourself. You're giving someone else the courage to take their own leap of faith. Hit that like button if Alina's journey reminded you that your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by how you choose to see yourself. Also subscribe and ring that notification bell because I'm committed to bringing you more stories of people who refuse to stay invisible, who built empires from nothing, and who proved that the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything you were meant to be. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to rewrite their story. Tag a friend who's been underestimated, a family member who's been overlooked, or anyone who needs a reminder that quiet strength can move mountains. Remember, you don't need permission to be extraordinary. You don't need someone else's approval to chase your dreams. And you definitely don't need to stay small to make others comfortable. Your transformation story is waiting to be written. The only question is, when will you pick up the pen? I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep building your empire, one brave decision at a time. Stay blessed.